All right, welcome to Networking Hour. Thanks for coming back. It's the first one of the semester. We got a good one here today. It's called Founder's Dilemmas. It's written by Noam Wasserman. He's, I think he's a professor at USC now, but he was a professor at Harvard when he wrote this book. And it's got some great insights. He did a lot of research to look into all the dilemmas you run into starting a business. And he's got some strategies for handling those. All right, so to get started, when we say dilemma, what do we mean? What do you guys think when you hear the word dilemma?
Problem.
Setback. Yeah, that's a good one. What else?
Decision to take.
Okay, yeah, time to take. What else? I think those are pretty good. So, this is from Wikipedia. Dilemma is a problem offering two possibilities, neither of which is practically acceptable. One in this position has been traditionally described as being on the horns of a dilemma, which neither horn being truthful. All right, so when you talk about founder's dilemmas, these are problems you're going to run into where there's not really an easy choice, nothing straightforward. Noam Wasserman did research on 10,000 different founders to compile the data for this book. The 10,000 were, you got some data from them, and then some he did some long, in-depth interviews in. Yeah, so there's some good kind of anecdotes, but also some substantial data to back it up. Mostly in the technology and life science industry is what he focused on. All right, so here's a quote that kind of underscores some of the things he found. It's unfortunate but true. Entrepreneurship is a battle. Most casualties stem from friendly fire or self-inflicted wounds. What do you guys think about that?
True.
You agree?
Yes.
So team and how you work with your co-founders is going to be one of the biggest challenges you have. And what's interesting is, really what's should be holding your business back is whether it fits with the market and you can make money and all those things. So managing a way to avoid a lot of these friendly fire situations where you just have your team break down, even if you got a good business, is something to definitely think about. So that's what a lot of this is about. Another one is the statistic. 60 to 65% of failures on VC-backed companies are attributed to the team. What do you guys think of that?
Is that fact?
Yeah, it's stat. I didn't make it up. If I made it up, it'd be a good one, I guess. But no, it's really true. It was in the book. And it seems high because you think VC-backed companies will fail because there's not a product market fit. They have the money. They had a good enough team to get VC funding. And then they end up having a breakdown because of some disagreement with the team. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's interesting because it's already attached and backed by VC firm, right? Which so therefore they've been vetted,
yeah.
And they still have that percentage of failure. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing because imagine those that aren't VC backed, they haven't passed that point of credibility yet. So it must be even significant. It must be significantly high.
Yeah, it's true. Definitely.
Pick your partners carefully.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's good advice too. When you think about VC companies, the model's like one home run and then a couple minor successes. To have this many fail because of the team is just pretty mind-boggling. It shows how difficult it is for people to work with people. Any other thoughts?
Was that perspective like the VC perspective, or like just did you find that in talking to everyone?
Yeah, I guess that's a good question of where that came from. I have to refer to the book to see if this is something that the VC tagged as the team was the problem, or.
But even if you look at like the word team and don't think about like a business, think about like a football team or a basketball team or like a team of coaches coaching like one athlete.
Yeah.
Then it's most of the failures are because the team breaks down. It's not because the other team was just that they're that much better.
Yeah, that's true.
Somebody wasn't able to do their part.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Also seems like if you could help VC firms select better teams, or VC firms learn how to select better teams, then they'd make a lot more home runs.
Yeah, I think that's true too. All right, so when Noam Wasserman broke it down into the different dilemmas, kind of looked at this path of everything you're going to face as you start a business. Your first dilemma is, should you start a business? Should you found now? Is now the right time? And so if not, you remain a non-founder and you don't even get into any of this stuff over here. Once you decide to found a business, you've got a choice of whether you want to do it with a team or you want to be a solo founder. And so we'll talk about some of the pros and cons of that. You decide to form with the team, you run into all these founding team dilemmas, and then also, as you grow from there and you move beyond the founding team, you start hiring people. You've got another set of dilemmas there with hires, investors, and then succession, and things like that. So we'll go through all these different ones. And then also there's another one that kind of weaves through the whole book, and it's this wealth versus control dilemma. And it has to do with what the founders are interested in. They want to control this business forever, or do they want to get rich? And sometimes those are at odds. Sometimes you need to give up a little bit of control in order to bring in investors or partners that you need to help your business succeed and maximize your personal return. But, it's really, some people could be looking at it different ways. They may want the business to be all theirs. And when you have conflicts between the people on the team for these two reasons, that can cause some pretty significant problems. And those happen at all stages. All right, so pre-founding dilemmas. You have this career dilemma. Should you become an entrepreneur? If so, when should you make the leap into founderhood? Early in your career, after you accumulate more career experiences? How can I dispassionately evaluate my idea? Are going to be the questions here. Any thoughts on that? What do you guys think? How would you answer these questions?
It depends. Everything's unique, of course. For me, I find that I think that having some career experience is going to give some credibility, being able to, if you're the right fit, you always get that question like, well, why are you the right person to found this organization? What do you bring to the table? If you have experience, that would play in, but maybe you're just a guy that writes some code or something and you create like a nifty software application and that's it. I guess that's still basic experience, but you don't need to work for a company to get that.
Yeah, and also it's like how much passion do you have for the service project you're establishing, and like are you establishing it from the ground up as an idea, and like how holistic is it, and like are you the guy with the idea, no one else kind of had it, so so maybe just run with it. For experience.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So it depends on your idea whether you're going to need to accumulate that experience or you could go ahead and do it now. And then also if your idea is just ready to go, that might be something that drives you to do it. All right. So looking at some motivations, I thought this was kind of interesting. The book broke down a lot of these about motivations for men in their 20s, among entrepreneurs and then non-entrepreneurs. And so the way to read this is that for entrepreneurs, male entrepreneurs in their 20s, their top 4 motivations were power and influence, autonomy, managing people, and financial gain. And then in blue is what the rank was for non-entrepreneurs. Over here is the top 4 for non-entrepreneurs in their 20s: security, prestige, financial gain, and affiliation. And then the rank for actual entrepreneurs. So you can see some different motivations there between people that actually do start businesses and don't start businesses. Any other conclusions you can draw from that? Anything you think was interesting, the way those motivations split up?
Yeah, autonomy trades off for security.
Yeah.
Financial gain's important in both columns. So everybody's under the impression that you're going to be financially more independent as an entrepreneur. That may or may not be true.
Yeah. So I guess there is an opinion out of which one is going to be better for their financial
I'd be
gain.
interested to know what happens to them after they become entrepreneurs, and then what they think about those same ideas.
Yeah, I think that's
Give them
good.
another 10 years and then tell me.
Kind of find it a little surprising the managing people rank so high among those.
As far as entrepreneurs.
Probably has a lot to do with power and influence.
Yeah, I think those are pretty linked.
But yeah, the desire for autonomy and you see a lot of people that are kind of self-starters, or especially you see like solopreneurs. I would think that managing people may not be aligned with all of those people's desires, but definitely goes hand in hand with power and influence.
Yeah, a lot of people say they have a hard time managing other people, but I guess entrepreneurs for the most part sign up for that.
Why would the non-entrepreneurs think that prestige was a like something that they could get as a non-entrepreneur?
I think it might be if they try to go work for a big company.
Like a prestigious company.
Yeah.
So like I work for IBM or Google
Or
or
the
something,
government.
or Apple or whatever.
Yeah, something that think it's prestigious as opposed to starting your own business that nobody's ever heard of when you get started, I guess.
No brand equity.
But
No prestige.
you don't think that there's a prestige to say, I own this?
Yeah.
Like, I own it? Like I started it, or it's mine?
Yeah, I think that's
it is, right?
What was that?
Oh, it's good.
So it depends on how good it is. Own a lemonade stand or own,
It's still
cable
yours.
television.
I mean, I don't know.
I think that's interesting. I mean, depending on your motivations, you may read these questions differently. Obviously, some people are reading it as for being an entrepreneur is a way to get financial gain, and others think to get into jobs a better way to get financial gain. So I think it has a lot to do with each person's attitude about what they think is prestigious and so forth.
Yeah, I think that's really where that managing people is a motivation.
Yeah.
Rather than a skill that they happen to be good at managing people.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to manage people?
Yeah, that's pretty. So it might be like status type things that
Awesome.
manage all these people.
Control.
That's what they like.
I don't
rather
think
than
I've ever
actually
met
doing
anybody that's good at managing people in my life.
Oh, that's funny. All right, so moving on to women in the 20s. So among entrepreneurs, autonomy, power, influence, managing people, also third with women and altruism. And then on the non-entrepreneur side, recognition, affiliation, security, and lifestyle. What do you guys think of these?
It's
That's
crazy.
what you'd expect.
It's crazy there's no financial aims.
That's true. Yeah, not even on the top four. Yeah,
Dictionary.
would be the one. Yeah, altruism scores higher than financial gain.
Yeah.
What else do you guys notice?
Recognition, kind of a surprise for non-entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
That women entrepreneurs are a little bit more like male entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's true. They do have some similar.
Like switch to altruism with
Yeah,
financial
these
gain.
top
and
three
same-
are the same. Yeah, that's true. That's a good observation. You might have to look in the book. It's a long book, but it does have some good information. It actually talks about 20s, 30s, and they got all kinds of different age groups. If you want to dig more into this, but that was pretty interesting. All right, so some more factors affecting when to found a business. The arguments for doing it early in your career is that before the golden handcuffs, you get a really cushy job with a good salary and stuff like that. If that gets too strong, it might be hard to leave that to go start a business. Also, family handcuffs may get too strong. You just may not be able to take that risk at that point later in your career. Before you become too specialized, and then before you become too reliant on employer resources, so you may not be able to, work in a scrappy startup anymore after you get used to all these other things. And then some arguments for waiting until you found is you can build more human capital, you get more experience, social capital, more connections, and then financial capital, so you may have more resources to start a business later. What do you guys think of that? Anything else you'd add or consider for this decision?
And market timing, like the environmental context, just in terms of like the product in the market, whether or not the time is right.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. So like if it's an idea that's kind of time sensitive, maybe something that goes out the window if you actually want to do this business.
You might have to wait on like a technology or patent or something like that to kind of go through in order for your product to be, fully complete, functional.
or laws.
Yeah.
Medical marijuana or something.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, on the technology front, you actually see that more often than you think, where people have ideas that are ahead of technology. Does anybody get to hear the Pixar founder speak? The guy he was an NMSU grad. He graduated from NMSU in like 1975 or something like that. Yeah, he was co-founder of Pixar.
Visionary too.
Albie Ray Smith. And so what they did is they got all into animation, and the computers just weren't able to do it at the time. So they were looking at Moore's law as like, computer power doubles every 18 months. And they knew that, by a certain date, I think they figured out it was going to be like 1995 or something like that they would have enough power to actually do it. And so they're working on all this technology that really is only going to be applicable once they have the computing power to do it. And it was like not a day before that. They released Toy Story in 1995 after like 20 years of working on Pixar and just kind of floundering around. I mean, they got hooked up with some different benefactors, and they were under Lucasfilm for a little while, and then they got sold to Steve Jobs, and basically Steve Jobs ended up with like 70 or 80% of the company because they were so desperate for cash at that time. And then that's where he made a lot of his money when he went public right after Toy Story. But I mean, can you imagine waiting like 20 years and just working on this business, kind of scraping by until finally the technology's there and it can be a super successful business?
Well, I mean, what were they working on exactly? Why wouldn't you just not do anything until 5 years before?
Well, that's funny, yeah. They actually had a lot of issues with like just little things about doing computer animation. So they were building all these like motion blur was a big problem. Of like they didn't have a good way of doing it so it could like smoothly do animation on a computer. And they figured out how to do that. So there was stuff that they needed to be working on. They need to learn a lot about animation and just to be able to get
there's probably stuff they were able to do, but the computer processing power wasn't able to do it like in a viable time frame.
Yeah. So they could do like, a 30-second clip that would go in a Star Wars movie. But to do a full-length feature film, just to do like the image processing that takes like
the movie Avatar was like that too, I think.
Was it kind of?
The guy had to wait for technology to catch up
Until I was able to do
before
it.
he could create that sort of
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
What
So
are
yeah,
the
they can
books
do
that are
that.
written, like, where the guy goes, he goes to like another planet and he has like superhuman strength. He could jump and fly and what was that? He has a little alien dog. It's a really good. No, it's. I'm like, oh wait, hold on. I
Not
forgot.
that big. You should write that book. It was pretty good.
Man, what is that movie? It's really cool, but
Yeah.
yeah, this was written like so long ago, and when they actually made a movie, it's like, dang, this seems like a brand. Like this is forward thinking.
And it's time.
Yeah.
Well, they
So-
weren't just doing that either. They were doing other stuff, right? Like, I think one of the guys that started Pixar was working for a company called Wavefront Technologies in Santa Barbara. I remember going there and talking to that guy.
Yeah, that's it. John Carter. I was just
Sorry,
trying to.
no,
I was gonna say John Smith. Yeah, I was like, John Smith.
Yeah, they did have other businesses. They actually sold some stuff to Disney about like computerizing the way they did their like cell animation. So they had some stuff, but it was really they didn't have a real viable business until Toy Story came out. And that's how Steve Jobs ended up
You
acquiring
just
so
like
much of it.
sit there and wait. You do stuff.
Yeah, I think they were working pretty hard. But that was what allowed them to be ready once the technology was done. All right, some more factors to consider. Ideally, when you start a business, you got favorable career circumstances, personal circumstances, and market circumstances. Obviously, that may not always be the case. You may decide to do it anyway. But, you're going to have the right work experience, low opportunity costs, the entrepreneurial motivations, the supportive family situation, and then big opportunity where it's the right time to start the business. There are going to be things you're thinking about as far as when to start your business. All right, some kind of gray area obstacles and potential solutions. Anybody ever heard this? I got everything but an idea.
I have the opposite.
Yeah. Idea and need everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see both of those actually. I think this one's kind of interesting. Usually the solution is, find an idea founder that needs your strengths, and start a business with somebody else. If you don't have an idea, participate in other startups as an advisor, an investor, start to get involved that way. Because it doesn't take that long to be around startups before you get tons of ideas. And
So how do you find those people?
people that,
Law of attraction.
yeah, we see them sometimes. Actually, I'd say a lot of people in the Aggie Startup Club probably fall into that, where they're interested in entrepreneurship, they want to start a business, but they don't have a particular idea. Would you say that's true?
Yeah.
They probably don't have anything else either, though, in that regard.
Yeah, I meant, yeah, they have to have something. Yeah, sounds cool.
So whether they really have everything, it's a question whether they have everything but the idea, or they just don't have an idea or anything else. So, yeah, I guess you'd have to, probably talk to them and figure that out. But anyway, Aggie Startup Club meets every 2 weeks. Right. If you go to the Arrowhead website /startup, you can see their schedule. You can just drop into those meetings and pitch your business idea, and maybe you'll find somebody like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll just open up any page and be like, okay, here's this. Imagine.
That's good. And then Alexis is the president, so you can ask him about the club too.
Awesome.
All right, another one. But I'm not armed for battle yet, so basically, like, just don't have the experience. So in that case, you might find a job to gain a lack of experience, or you can find complementary co-founders that are going to help you fill those gaps that you don't have. All right, but I'm going to hurt your family. So you know, if you're going to take a lot of time to start this business, you know, it may take time away from your family. So you just need to have an open dialogue there. A lot of times the advice is define success and failure, cap resource and time commitment. So at some point you know that this business is going to work and you walk away. You don't just let it hang around for years and years and years. And then also just spend more money than you can afford to lose in it. Handcuffs gotten too strong, so save money to provide a cash cushion, lower your personal burn rate, find some way to make it easier for you to start a business. Avoid waiting too long to find and you know, kind of redundant experience. So working in a job that isn't moving you forward. So you might just make sure you don't wait too long before you start a business. What do you guys think of those? Any thoughts?
What do you do about the family handcuffs? You just divorce your wife and leave your children?
I wouldn't recommend that. But, you know, it basically just try to address the concerns up front. You know, spell out what your goals are for the business, how much time you think it's really going to take. And they recommend, you know, clear communication and being realistic about the time commitment, how much it's going to cost, everything like that.
Get a good pitch.
Yeah. Always get, you got to sell everybody on this.
Yeah, you really perfect your pitch if you're using it on your wife.
Hard to sell. There you go.
You always have to start with imagine.
I like that. That is a good start. Just start networking hours with imagine.
Imagine this.
We're doing networking. All right, factors affecting when to found. So going through all these different things. You know, when should you found? Do you have a dispassionate evaluation of the idea? Do you have those favorable circumstances? If so, go into founderhood. If not, reevaluate. All right, so let's say we all decide to start a business. Now we've got some founding team dilemmas. We've got to decide whether we want to do it on our own or we want to form a team. We run into all these different things. The team dilemmas and then the roles. And, they talk about 3R system: relationships, roles, and rewards, about how you incentivize team members. All right, so what do you guys think? Pros and cons of starting a business by yourself as opposed to as a team?
Solo, you kind of answered yourself, and you can kind of move along at your own pace. But, you know, with the team, with strong capabilities and knowledge and all that, you can probably advance a little bit quicker as long as you guys are all on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah,
You could get really stagnant working by yourself and kind of lose track of what your original idea was through research and experience, getting sidetracked, but and your skill set too. In the beginning, like if you have an idea and you know marketing or web design or something like that isn't really your forte, but it's mandatory. You're going to have to go through a long learning curve to try to figure all that out yourself, or use Fiverr.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? I think let's kind of sum up the main points.
I think that's actually a really good last point, though. Just the use Fiverr is that like there's a lot of proxies to like not having that skill set yourself that didn't exist 5 years ago.
Exactly.
Delegation is a good.
We said that too. It triggered like a hybrid between the two, where like you're solo, so you have the control, you can move at your own pace, you can move quick, but then you have the team by outsourcing, and you don't have all those dilemmas.
And you don't have to
because
fire
basically
them.
you're the boss. Yeah.
Since it's just like if they didn't do a good job, you just use the other guy that does it for $5.
And you don't even need to pay them if they don't do a good job.
Yeah.
I think that's what Fiverr caters to. Basically, it's pretty much for solo founders to help you with the team. Yeah, so that's a good point. That does make it easier. I don't think that Fiverr was around when they wrote this one. or they
Right.
would have.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. I don't think so either.
Yeah.
It's still hard for me to remember Fiverr when I'm like,
Yeah, it was a good tool.
No, but that's something
You
to
know, it's supposed to
definitely
be-
consider. That's good insight. Because like the solo versus team, like that whole versus conundrum is kind of like a false dilemma. Because there is that other option now where you can just be a solo, but like utilize a hybrid, you know, like a network.
but then it's not fun. It's like
Yeah, you do miss out on some other things.
it is. It's fun whenever you're work. From personal experience, it's fun when you're working with like a little group and like everybody's like, yeah. When you're by yourself, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you can feed off of somebody else's other positive energy. Whenever you're like, it's like right now, it's more like sometimes I'm just like, I don't feel like doing shit, and then other times I'm like, like, oh yeah, I feel great. I wish I could share this with somebody, but before I used to be part of a group, and it was so easy just to go to work and just feel. You just get fueled by them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. And then also when you're thinking about this decision about founding team, it's other people that you're probably going to give equity to. I think when you go to that next step of building a team, you're just hiring people. That's kind of a different type of thing because you can, if you got the cash, you can pay people to do these type of things. Founders are going to be a little different because they're going to get equity and they're going to be attached to this company for a longer time. So you want to think about, your human capital, skills, knowledge, experience that you have, any complementary skills that would help. Social capital, networks, access to investors, customers, and partners. And then financial capital. Do you need money? Is there a founder you could bring on that would have the cash or access to investors to make this happen? So some things to consider, task preference. Even if you have the required skills, are there tasks you'd rather not do? So maybe you could program or something like that, but you'd rather start a business and focus on the business side and have somebody else program. So, are you going to want to do everything that you have to do in the startup? If not, then you might need to bring somebody else on. Also, your collaborative style. You think of just 1 + 1, so 2 people, does it equal more than 2 or less than 2? Some people work together and they're less productive than they were if they were just on their own. Some people work together and they get more productive. So thinking about that, do you work well with others? And should you be trying to do it by yourself and just stay away from team members, or would you really get a productivity boost if you got the team members? That's support and validation, so that's something you don't get on Fiverr necessarily. Is, would having a partner help through the process, even if they bring limited capital, would it just be kind of good to have somebody else in the team to work through and balance each other out? What do you guys think of those?
Definitely things to consider.
Yeah.
We should go on Fiverr and set up fake accounts so people send us their ideas and then just steal them.
A new business idea already.
And then sell those ideas?
Exactly.
Do a new extension of Fiverr for the
Sixer.
for the solopreneurs to give them support and validation for $5. Be like, you're doing a good job, man. You're almost there.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Maybe you could get everything on Fiverr.
High five.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what the Fiverr is for.
Yeah. That's great.
Pat on the back. Keep it up, man.
That's just motivational text messages or something.
It's automated. Sir. Everything is.
That's good. Maybe you can get everything on Fiverr.
And you can't get everything off Fiverr.
All right, so you might want to solo found if you're experienced, you're well connected in the startup industry, plus you have the financial means. You got a strong preference maintaining control. If you don't require any support or validation, and if it's a small, slow-moving industry, because doing it by yourself, it's not going to be as fast as if you're with a team. You might want to build a founding team if you got gaps in the businesses requires. The founder doesn't want to do everything. If you like collaborating, definitely want support and validation. And then it's a fast-moving market with first-mover advantages. You're going to want to build a team and try to get there as quickly as possible. All right, so once you decide you want to build a team, you got these other questions. Who should you found with? What should they do? How would you compensate them? Any thoughts on those questions? How do you guys answer those?
Like you just found with people
Some-
who share your idea and
But have a
understand like the
difference.
whole picture, and then they should do whatever their strengths are. And then compensation always is up for negotiation in terms of maybe some buy-in or just some you know, pay by the hour kind of compensation, or those high fives or pats on the back. A combination of all of them.
I think there's some context to it too. Like if if it's like a technology board of some research at the university, and there's like multiple researchers on it, then you might have some limitations on some of your founding decisions as far as who is and who isn't on your team. Or if you live in a rural area and you're trying to do something that's really high tech, then you're going to have certain limitations imposed on you as well. So like there's always like good things to consider, but sometimes like if the opportunity's there, or if it's the time to strike is now, then like you got to go with what you have. And that may be that you have a team around you that you can resource, or you do it yourself, but most times it's decided by context, I think, too.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to think about it.
You shouldn't found with anybody that doesn't know about founders' dilemmas.
Yeah, a new rule. All right, so the author talks about these three buckets of people that you would work with. Family and best friends, acquaintances, and past coworkers. He says usually the best ones are past coworkers because you've worked together before. It's not like a different type of relationship than you've had before. He also talks about this playing with fire gap. The basic idea is that, if relationship blows up with family or best friends, that can be pretty damaging. They talk about some founders in the book that started the business with all his family and friends, and then the business went bad, and he basically lost his business and his support network at the same time. And so that's your kind of playing the fire, and then also you've got this.
That's exactly what happened.
You might have challenges discussing elephants in the room, like things that need to be discussed. You may just avoid those when you're working with family and friends, whereas you're more likely to discuss those with coworkers, just because that's kind of the way your relationship. What do you guys think of this? Do you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, this discussing the elephants concept is really what I mean by not wanting to found with somebody that just isn't aware of the concepts underlining founders' dilemmas, right? Because those sorts of things need to be addressed early on. Otherwise, you're, really setting yourself up for a lot of the complications, I think.
Yeah.
I think it totally depends on who brings what to the table. If your family and friends bring stuff to the table that's going to fill the gaps of where you're lacking in your entrepreneurial or whatever pieces of the puzzle that you need filled in, that's great. If they're just going to be what do you call those, angel investor people or whatever, and they are going to expect that you collaborate with them on everything because they bring you money, it's not going to work. So it just depends. It really depends on what your business is and who the person is and what they're bringing to the table. Because I can think of past coworkers, there's no way I'd start business with those people. I worked great with them. It was great working with them. But no way. It's not. They don't bring anything to the table that would enhance a business opportunity for me.
Yeah, definitely. It's got to be a good fit for the business. And then, family and best friends, you can start a business with them if it's a great right fit, and maybe that's something that you want to do. I think the thing to just watch out for is these two traps, and make sure that you find some ways to avoid them. All right, so managing these relationship dilemmas. You can compartmentalize relationships. So if size allows, avoid direct reports between those with personal relationships between each other. They talked about several examples about that in the book. Try to look at the negative scenarios. So what if this business goes bad? How do you manage from there? Create disaster plans, I guess. Force sensitive discussions to avoid that, kind of avoiding the question. And then in some cases, you may want to avoid it, involve a referee, kind of help manage discussions and things like that. All right, some other ones you run into, role dilemmas. So sometimes titles can be an issue. There's say you've got somebody on your team and you're just dividing up, CTO, CFO, and you're like, well, this guy kind of knows how to program, or he's kind of technical, so they're the CTO. But really, once your business gets to scale and it comes to the market, they're probably not, they may not be the best fit for CTO. And so that's something to consider up front. You can easily give them that title now, are they going to be a good fit for that if this business becomes what we can? And then just think about trying to take that title back later. It might be kind of difficult. So that was a dilemma you can run into the roles. The question of overlapping or divided roles. I think this one's really interesting. I guess, what do you guys think? You can sometimes have roles overlapping where both people are kind of working on similar things, or clearly dividing them. Which one do you think works better? What do you recommend?
I think you need to clearly divide and create a business model that is abstract from you as an individual and the founders as individuals. Because ultimately, you need this business to be able to operate while you disappear tomorrow, right? Or if any one of you disappeared.
Yeah.
So if you just outlined and created a solid business model at an abstract level with exactly the roles and responsibilities that were required to fulfill that business to its success, and then you determined who is best to fill each of these roles, and then with the plan to graduate out of them and fill them with the most appropriate people as needed and as time passes, then you'd be able to graduate back, retire out of your business, still own it, and but ultimately have a properly functioning, successful business, regardless of the individuals.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Dividing up the roles in a way that they could be passed off to other people.
I'm experiencing that right now, and it's like not even a founding. This business has been around since 1993, right? And they're still trying to establish the roles, responsibilities, and all that kind of stuff, and like dividing roles between people. And I mean, you'll go a month or two and find out the person can't even handle certain tasks or things. You know what I mean? So it's something that definitely, if it was established initially at the founding, and it's never concrete. It's always kind of manipulated, but. I think dividing roles is super important, and people knowing those roles and being accountable for them. Yeah,
that overlapping roles, it causes problems with accountability. Who gets credit for success and failure and things like that. So,
I think that people are like, whenever when you just find that person that's like, I don't know what you can do, but I'm sure you can do something. Like they just have something great. I read that Henry Ford wouldn't hire for a position. He would just interview, and then he would meet this person, and he'd be like, "Okay, awesome, and you're hired. I'm going to put you here." And then he personally would go to that person and or ask his supervisor how they're doing, and then he would try them in a different part, and he'd move them all around the factory until they found that perfect spot for him. And even if you had to create a new spot for him, having
like a hire the character, train the skill kind of thing.
That's exactly what I believe in. They can add value.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that's a good way to think about it.
And also, too, you have to not just define roles and responsibilities, but you have to also understand what skills and talents and characteristics and things are required to be able to fill those roles and responsibilities. Right? Because otherwise, how would you know how to fill that role?
Yeah.
And I think that approach should definitely be built into a system. Even if you outline a business plan, you have it all laid out with roles and responsibilities. I think maybe having a slot for that creative opportunity. More flex with the flex spot.
So I think the idea, I like the idea of creating the team first before you actually try to build the company, and then that team is like your little SEAL Team 6. And you go on different missions, new ideas, this is my little squad, and we're gonna go try to found this or found that, and the roles might change all the time, but you have that strength and character and the people around you.
Yeah, that's a strategy they talked about in the book, Good Great, where it's getting the right people on the bus and then you figure out where to go.
Yeah.
Just kind of the idea of that.
So I guess again it depends. If you already have a business in mind, then maybe that planning it out approach and then filling the roles would work. But if you don't really already have the business all planned out, I guess just building a team.
Yeah.
You're just somebody that has ideas all the time.
Somebody that can execute them.
Or to tell you that they're bad ideas. Either way.
And I think that, using that as a segue, one of the roles that I like to use is the hipster hacker hustler.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the overlapping of, while someone's the idea guy, someone is the hacker who knows how to do it, and then the manager. So to keep everybody in check, type of thing. So instead of saying, you know, you're the CEO, CTO, CFO, in this case, it's everybody kind of takes whatever you fall under, like if it's management, then you'll, you know, be focusing more on that. Or if you're more creative, you're gonna be doing this. And then if you're more of the technical, you know, designer, then you'll be doing this.
Yeah.
You can figure out those titles whenever you go public.
Yeah.
I like that. I like the titles though, hipster hacker.
I like those titles.
Yeah, see,
I don't like
those are
CFO or that. I don't like
Yeah,
those.
right.
Yeah, those are good thoughts. All right, next one, going with how you do decision making. So 2 options here. Obviously, you can choose a blend between them. So these are the extremes. Egalitarian, so everything's consensus based. Everybody's got a say, and you wait until you get everybody on board before you make a decision. Or you've got a hierarchy where you've got somebody who's in charge and they're the ultimate decision makers. What do you guys think? What's a better way to go?
On that one, one of the great things about where we are in entrepreneurship now is that we have data.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to listen to everybody's opinions, you have to go by fact and listen to the data, go get user data, customer data, and then from there you can make a decision.
Yeah, so some evidence-based. Yeah, and that kind of takes it out of this where you've got people fighting with each other about the best idea. Just do everything evidence-based. Yeah, I think it's a good one, good option. Any other thoughts?
I think it depends on the business. I mean, if you got a collection of directors, your lead teams or something, and they have the authority and the power to make decisions, but then they also have the accountability of being, you know, reprimanded for bad decisions or whatever it may be. Sometimes it's difficult for one person at the very top to make a decision all across the board. But depending again on what you're doing, maybe that just makes sense.
Yeah.
Maybe some kind of hybrid again, you know, between the 2 extremes.
Yeah.
How big's the company?
Well, yeah, I think
You
that's
have
another
5
factor.
people. Why would you not listen to everybody? I mean,
Yeah, so small
and hold them all
family team.
accountable.
Might do them all as egalitarian, yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Speed to market's important. I think hierarchical rules.
Because it may be faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here's some advantages of each one. So egalitarian, they build trust in groups of strangers because everybody's got a say. They feel like their voices get heard. Affirms expectations of equal treatment. Some disadvantages is that building a consensus can take too much time. So yeah, you're right. In a fast-moving market, it might be difficult to spend a lot of time trying to get everybody on board when you really just maybe need to make decisions. Also, the accountability gets a little less clear in that model too. So for hierarchical, the advantage is that decision makers can mobilize quickly. You can make decisions and just go do it. There's really clear accountability. But in complex environments, you may require those multiple inputs. You know, sometimes the person that has the best information to make the decision may not be the person at the top. It may be somebody that's actually working with the customers or something like that. So, any other considerations you think you'd have here about which one to choose? You guys agree with those?
I mean, money doesn't seem to be mentioned in there, but I think that's a huge factor in terms of whether or not you can be hierarchical. I mean, if you can't just pay somebody a fair amount of money that's going to motivate them, then it's, I think, difficult to be hierarchical. I mean, you need some power behind that ability to be top-down commanding, like cash. But if you don't have cash and you need buy-in, then and you're not, you either have to be like ultra persuasive, or like have amazing promises, or at least just get some real buy-in. And I think the buy-in, if you can have at least have a fair environment, in the long run you're going to be a more stable organization and be able to live up to challenges that may arise in the market. But money, if that disappears, then so does a lot of other things, in terms of like just commitment.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, a small team, like command and control, is probably not going to work, where it's just like one person's do this, do this, do this.
Yeah.
A lot of times people are starting a business because they don't want to be involved in that process, and so
Just
important
use
to get
fear.
everybody's ideas. Fear.
I'm with you.
I don't know how good that works.
I'll kill you.
That works.
We're done.
I don't want to bend your team anymore.
I know.
The studies show that fear-based motivation is not as effective as positive
Right, because the second you go to sleep, your throat's slit.
We're just focusing on people's positive aspects, as part of the team, instead of focusing on what they're doing wrong constantly.
Pros and cons of both. I mean, you can't
You gotta point it out when they're doing something.
You can't, exactly.
Not everybody gets a trophy.
Is right,
But as a motivational tactic.
Oh, yeah.
At least the couple peer-reviewed papers I have.
Yeah,
So
I think that makes. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, this one, it's kind of the way the mafia operates.
Totalitarian state.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No way, man.
But
Democracy is the way to do it. Egalitarianism, I think, is just a more stable environment. Well, I don't know.
All right, so some easy paths to avoid. So these are things you should not do. These are the easy things to do, but you should avoid these. So number one, avoiding conflict. So avoid assigning one CEO so you have multiple decision makers. So this is almost always a bad idea, because then responsibility, blame, credit, they all cause problems because you don't have some clear accountability towards the decision maker. The title inertia. So this is if you put somebody in as CEO, then they may not want to relinquish that title, or CFO or CTO or something like that. So think about is that title something that they can keep as the company evolves? Inflating titles. So this goes back to the same thing. You over title founders, it can be disruptive later if they're not a good fit for those roles. Also, wanting allies on the board. So a non-CEO founder on the board can cause confusion about who reports to who. Why is that? So CEO reports to the board, right? Mm-hmm. Then you've got a co-founder that is under the CEO, but then they're also on the board. Right? So you've got that issue where the CEO is having to report to this person that reports to him under that.
Too many hats.
Yeah. So that can be a challenge because you may want somebody on the board that's your friend or that you work with, but then you get this kind of weird relationship where one's reporting to the other and vice versa. What do you guys think of that?
So it's like an awkward checks and balances or something?
Yeah, kind of.
And if you make them mad, then
It's almost like conflict of interest kind of thing, where the person the CEO reports to the board, and the guy that's working for the CEO is on the board, that they can say, I don't like the CEO, so I want him fired.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
And I think it's better just to have a competent board as well versus just a friendly ally that's gonna go with whether it be a yes man. You don't want a yes man board. What's the point?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. All right, and then ignoring incompatible motivation. So, half your team wants to make money and the other half wants to control the company. Those can be incompatible. Those can be problems. Multiple control-related founders may have problems because they all want to be CEO or something like that. So you want to think about those things up front and really try to address those motivations early. So because the problems will just get worse later. All right, so reward dilemmas, when to split equity. Can we get any opinions on this about when's the right time to split equity in the company?
Never. Just keep it all. Keep it all yourself.
No, yeah, we'll give it to you down the road, right? Yeah.
Just keep splitting
work
equity.
for very long. Or maybe 10, 12 years.
Any other thoughts?
I think one idea that Chris shared with us in our startup was that no one should automatically get equity. Maybe, if it's your idea, a little bit of equity for having the idea, but until it is earned, then everybody earns their equity, even the founders. So I think that was a really good idea too.
Yeah, maybe set up a milestone that once we hit this point or something like that, we'll have a better idea of who's put in how much work, and we can maybe have a discussion about some splitting.
Yeah, so some investing. Yeah.
Plus, once you start to give equity, how do you stop? Once you've given
once you give it out,
a percentage,
it's
how do you?
theirs.
You can't take it back. I mean, there's no way to undo that kind of stuff. You don't want. I don't know.
Yeah, there was one guy that was.
Reward-based.
I think he ended up with a part of Facebook, right? He just didn't move to California. He had the equity and he just didn't go, but he still had the equity, right? Because they just gave it out.
Good for him.
Nice move. All right, so some arguments for splitting earlier is they attract key players who need the equity incentive. they've already worked together in another startup and you know each other's skills, then you might clearly know how to value everybody's equity contribution. Negotiate calmly before you're under pressure to split later, or it's more valuable, maybe more difficult to divide everything up. The arguments for splitting later is you learn about your co-founders' contributions. You can solidify your startup strategy, business model, so you know how much the equity is actually going to be worth. Solidify roles, so you can figure out how much everybody's going to contribute and how important they are. Learn about co-founders' commitment, strengthen incentives. Avoid continual renegotiations as time change. Any other arguments on either side you think of?
Again, like some kind of a hybrid. But I think you have to like earn it first, like what Alexis was saying. You can't just like give it away right away unless you're like some guy coming in with an idea and capital, of some sort. But I think like a rubric or some kind of a equity split plan, right, that does account for these different intangible aspects or tangible aspects, like ideas versus like sweat equity versus actual like financial capital and things, and maybe it's just some kind of scheme or mechanism that would allow you to say, if you contribute X, Y, Z, you can get this. If you contribute just X, this is what you can get over this period of time, or something to that effect.
Yep.
Yeah, I think waiting till like some valuation point is good. Whenever you're able to find some type of like we're getting an investment or something like that happens.
That's when you definitely need to make some decisions.
Yeah, I mean until then, like everyone wants equity early on in the company, but it's not equity in a company that's not worth anything is also not worth anything.
Yeah.
So, waiting for that valuation point is a pretty good plan, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, waiting for it to actually be worth something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like.
Well, I like setting up a plan in advance before the real value comes into play too, because that's when a lot of like greed and things like can emerge. But if you have maybe like a flexible renegotiable plan or something, but at least some kind of plan in advance so that when that real value emerges, like a investment or a big sale or something, you kind of already have like a baseline as to how it's going to be split up versus waiting until that money comes to the table and then get into that negotiation. Because I think you can negotiate that plan and agree to it in advance, less emotionally and more, within some kind of reason versus, not. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry if you went over this before, but how does equity fit in with LLC? Is it a similar model in terms of? Yeah,
I mean, you're going to have shares of ownership in the company. I guess how is it phrased in LLC? It's not shares. It's because there's not shares.
Yeah, because I was
like
a little bit. I know I just filed for my LLC,
Yeah.
and I've actually never even taken a full business course in my life, so I'm somewhat familiar with equity, but I don't really have a sense of how to go about it.
So you got members, and you can divide up some ownership percentage. LLCs let you divide up profit sharing separate from that too, but all those things would be factors of how you want to split that up with other founders. And you're going to have similar decisions that you're going to need to make too about how much does somebody deserve of the company based on their contribution.
Yeah. I guess I'm a single founder. That's how I designated, so I'm kind of sort of confused with how this fits in, or
you're 100%.
How to break it apart, or
if you think about a house, like when you own a house, if you're the only person on the mortgage or on the deed, then you have 100%. And so if you had to get a cosigner in order to buy the house, and you qualified by yourself for $180,000, but then the house that you wanted was $200,000, and so you brought somebody in. So if you think about a business the same way, you just needed a little. They should only get that small, like a small chunk of equity, and think about the percentage of the original purchase price. And then, whenever it sells, that percentage of profit would be returned to them.
Yeah,
that's how I think of it.
Depending on your agreement, though, I mean, equity is just like pieces of a pie. And if you're the only owner, then you own all the pieces of the pie. And depending upon what you can agree on,
obligation is.
Yeah, liability is involved in that too, because it's not all just equity, there's a lot of liability, but equity is just the value, right, of what it's worth, right?
I would need to look this up online, exactly definition of equity and how it's partitioned.
Yeah, so it's totally negotiated by the founder, so you'd get the choice. As a solo founder, you'd be the sole founder.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have 100% equity, you'd own all the company. If you brought people on your team, you could pay them as employees. They wouldn't necessarily get a share of the company at all, or you could try to give them 10% of the company in exchange for that.
I have a question. Can we renegotiate the equity percentages anytime, or
As long as you get both parties to agree, yeah. That's the key thing.
Because it would be not fair if somebody doesn't contribute to anything and have a big chunk of the pie, right?
Yeah, that can be a major problem. That's why you make these decisions on, if you split too early and you give them a big chunk and you don't know what they're going to contribute, that equity's there, you got to give it away. So we'll talk about some strategies for how you avoid that.
Okay.
All right, so some criteria for equity splits. You're going to factor in past contributions. What the study found was that, of all these people they talked about, typically the idea founder, the one that brought the idea to the table, they got a 10 to 15% premium in equity because they were the idea founder. Capital contribution was really big. So if you actually bring cash to the table, you definitely should be compensated for that, especially if it's unequal, and everybody's not bringing the same amount of cash. The person that brought more cash to the meeting should definitely get more equity. Opportunity cost, so if somebody could go make $200,000 a year, or they could start working with your business, then you might need to compensate them more than somebody that doesn't have other prospects. Future contributions. So serial founder, somebody that has had a lot of success before, that they come on your business, they're going to really good contribution, they might demand a higher equity share. How much are they committing to it? Are they doing full-time or is it part-time? That should be factored in. Titles can be something to factor in too.
What do you mean by that, though, exactly? Or can you give an example of what you mean by future contributions and then titles?
Titles. Are they going to be the CEO or CFO? Maybe the title means something to them, and so they may not need as much equity because they get to be the boss or something like that. So I think it depends on.
Yeah, it's almost like credit in a movie too. Like you can just,
or vice
give them the title, tell
president,
whatever you want. It doesn't have to be like CFO or any of those major ones.
Yeah. Founder motivations and preferences. Are they trying to make as much money as they can, or do they want to really control everything? Those people may want more equity. Prior relationships are something you should factor into. And so this, I think, is the really important thing to think about is dynamic versus static equity splits. So this is what Chris was talking about. Is that rather than you give away a big chunk when somebody joins the company, they earn it over time. And I've heard some examples of where you maybe give somebody a small percentage for every month they work on it, or it vests after a year or two, however long they need to work on it. And then also have kind of some additional equity incentives tied to milestones. So if it's a developer, they get, an extra couple % equity once some beta version's released or something like that. So that then all the equity that they get is they've earned based on tangible contributions. What do you guys think of that? Can be like more dynamic,
flexible, dynamic equity split, and not even in whole percentages either. Like 0.25% or something. That way you have more to work with in terms of incentive, to accumulate and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because you only have 100%, right, to work with. So if you just make a 50-50 split, you're done. That's it. You can't do anything. But if you create, like a ton of shares at much smaller percentages, then you have more to work with.
And it doesn't have to be like truly like given to them as they did it, right? Like you can do something almost like a 401k where it's like what you're fully vested or something 2 years in at a certain percent.
Yeah, so say you work on the business, for a year and then you quit like halfway through getting it started, you didn't make it to 2 years, so then all you earn would invest. Say if you did vesting after 2 years. So the vesting that makes it sure that you're committed to the business for some period of time. So you don't just leave halfway through and just run off with your equity. Because really, the past contributions are important, but the future contributions are what's going to matter. And so, like, if investors come in, and they've got somebody that's got a big chunk of equity, but they're not doing anything, and they're not going to do anything in the future, they may force you to renegotiate that and change that, or if it can't be renegotiated, they may just back out of the deal or something like that. And in some cases, they'll actually make the equity for the founders revest once they invest. So you'd have to re-earn all that equity. Mm-hmm. They do that to incentivize you to continue working and make sure you don't walk out on it.
Sticking with the hybrid theme that's been mentioned a couple of times today, you do like a static split initially with some portion and then leave a pool of equity that can be left for people that are joining on later.
Yeah, that can be a good strategy. Yeah, the key thing is, you got to get everybody on board, and then just realize if you got to make changes, will you be able to negotiate with that person or make changes later if you need to. All right, so another thing to think about is your prior relationships. So if it's your friends, you might just think equal distribution, because it's just, if you didn't, it might just be inconsistent with what your relationship. You guys are friends, so why should one person get 90% equity, the other get 10? Whereas prior coworkers, it might be easier to do the equitable distribution, so more divided based on contributions or skill levels. And so then these two decisions might be the ones you'd make based on the prior relationships. What do you guys think of that?
It makes sense for your friend relationships, where that can be hard to kind of work out that dynamic of how you're going to justify who gets more. So
yeah. All right, so dilemmas beyond the founding team. Who do you hire, when, and who do you need to raise money from, and whether you do it at all. All right, so I thought this was pretty interesting. They did a study on a lot of tech startups. It was like a blueprint study or something like that for how companies hired new employees and what they use these different models. So STAR would be, we only recruit top talent, pay them top wages, give them resources and autonomy to do the job they need. Engineering would be very committed, skunk works mentality, and the binding energy was high because you're doing something that's really exciting. Commitment, you want to build a company that people don't want to leave when they retire. Bureaucracy would be make sure things are documented, have job descriptions, blah, blah, blah. Autocracy would be work, you get paid kind of thing. And so you've got a couple things here of how people are attached. Are they attached for the money or the work that they're doing, or they just love the community? Selected based on skills, potential, or fit with the team or organization. And then your means of control. Are you directly monitoring them? Is there some type of peer or cultural control? You're relying on professional standards or just formal processes and procedures. So you can look this study up. Stanford Project on Emerging Companies. It's a little old, but I think it does do a pretty good job of breaking down different hiring patterns for how you might hire people in your company. So here's kind of the blueprints. The STAR model is, people are attached to the work, they're selected based on the potential, and they're controlled by professional standards. Any of these stand out as ones that kind of make sense to you, or things that you think you'd use in your company? As far as the hiring blueprint of how you'd select people and get them engaged?
I'd say commitment.
Yeah. So, for the community, get a good fit, and then people are coordinated by the culture and other peers.
And I think one of the companies that does that very well is Disney.
Yeah.
Because the first week that you're there, they have an orientation for you, but the first 15 minutes of this orientation is a video of kids hearing that they're going to Disney and just getting super excited. So you're just oh my gosh, I'm actually making a difference.
Yeah.
So, and it's kind of builds that commitment and love to I love my job because I make people's days, everything. So.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
But then they overwork you and beat you.
Yeah, and then you're
just remember the kids.
Customer service.
It's for the kids.
It's for the kids, not for their parents.
All right. Anybody like any of these other ones?
I think if you had the resources, that the direct controller autocracy would be the most easy to manage.
Yeah, I think big companies kind of fall into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Especially with jobs that may not be super fulfilling, or the work's not that interesting, but you get paid a lot. Any others?
I think on either side of the table, I prefer to be under the commitment. Like, who doesn't want to love like what they do? I mean, who wants to work? And money's a motivator, but it's not everything, you know. So if you can like actually love your job, like fit the role perfectly, and have a supporting peer cultural context, I mean, that sounds like a fulfilling life.
Yeah. Yeah.
It should be called fulfillment.
Happiness.
Yeah. There you go. All right. Okay, so these are the descriptions again. So these are some stats they looked at. Which ones were least likely to fail, most likely to IPO, and then the highest growth in market cap. And so commitment, number one, least likely to fail, and then also most likely to IPO based on the study. So good choice. Star was split highest annual growth rate in market cap. And I think those are kind of the strong ones. Engineering did all right with that too. Any other observations on this?
Was there any like specific reasons given why commitment was like so far in the back of the pack for highest annual growth in market cap?
Not sure. I mean, any guess why that would be? Maybe because that may not be the focus of that
You're motivated
organization.
by money, you're motivated by what you do, and you enjoy it, and you'll do it. Even
But I
if
feel like
you
that
don't
would
pay.
maybe be something that would progress
Right.
or launch your the successful business is like the culture, the commitment, the happiness, the wanting to do whatever you do.
Yeah, you would see that growth too.
Because there is that like mythos that you do what you love and you never have to work, and then the money comes, they say,
Yeah.
right? Which I mean,
And
it
you're pretty
seems
much
to make
working
sense.
every hour you're awake because you love it. You know?
Right,
So I
yeah.
just feel like there should be some growth.
I think it's a good question. Like,
Yeah.
you would wonder why there wouldn't be better.
Because it's old. Because the study's old.
It is an old study. You're right. I haven't found a better one.
I mean, yeah. I mean, this study was after just 1 year after Google.
Was it?
It's
This
true.
one?
2002. Yeah. So .com bubble. Yeah, IPOs obviously are a lot more common. Yeah.
Interesting.
All right. Yeah, you see autocracy and direct control for startups really not doing well. No blueprint didn't do great. All right, moving on to hiring decisions.
Excellent.
I think this is kind of interesting as you look at different stages in your business. Who you hire is going to change. So as a startup, you're going to be looking at personal networks. So your founders probably how you get people. You're probably hiring generalists to cover multiple areas. Got a more flat reporting structure. It's mostly going to be equity compensation that you're going to get out at this stage. You start to transition, then you'll do more impersonal searches of networks, maybe of investors or other soon startups. The players transition to coaches, which is an interesting dynamic because you got to kind of step back and you're not doing everything anymore. The founders aren't; they're starting to train other people to do those types of things. Moderate cash, lower equity compensation, investing equity stakes would be what you see at this stage. And then as you get to mature stages, investor networks, executive searches. You've got a pyramidal structure, professional executives with company backgrounds, large company backgrounds. You got high cash compensations and the stock options instead of equity. Any questions on that?
Stock options actually is a pretty good option at the onset versus equity. You know, just like instead of just straight free equity, like you got some buy-in, right? Like you can buy into your equity with X amount of cash, like an investor relationship.
Yeah. The difference is too early before it IPOs. There's just not a market for that.
But you can still create stocks that are just private stocks that aren't in the open market like that, right? Where you have X amount of shares, and you can buy your way into equity with money now.
Yeah.
Right, and whatever other criteria. So like you got whatever it is to come to the table. It's like a franchise in a way, right? Where you can buy in, but at X amount of money, and then that gives you, sort of like
Because I
lineage.
thought stock was shares.
Yep.
So, it's kind of the same concept with investors. You can actually invest just on the very small side.
Yeah, I got the
Very
impression
small. Over here.
that hanging on to the equity
It's great. Everything is great.
from just the conversation that we had today about it is a very wise thing. Like hanging on to more of it for the longer period of time seems like a better choice than, I don't know.
I mean, it depends what you give it up for. Like, if you just give it away to somebody that doesn't contribute, that's probably not a good
So this
thing.
is kind of too general, I guess, the stages. I think there's, and I don't think everybody starts with the startup stage being that you find people based on personal relations or whatever. I think because there's too many places that you can go hire people. Now it's more, you can get into the interpersonal searches of networks or other investors on a quick level. You don't have to go through that part. So I don't know. It's old study. I'll be done with that.
I didn't mean to ask it. Well, I did directly ask everyone what they know about stocks and shares. I'm not putting anyone on the spot, but I would say the majority of us here don't really have a background.
Sure.
I do generally, I would say, but I just wouldn't know, for example, how to apply it to my business.
Yeah,
so I don't know if we have a couple minutes to maybe talk about the relevancy, but I'm just a little bit. I'm certainly not a stock market expert, and I haven't taken a class on it, so a little bit behind.
So if you buy stocks, like on the stock exchanges, you're buying shares of a company. You know, some of these companies have millions of shares, so you just get a tiny piece of it.
And what does that mean?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. What is that?
It means ownership of the company.
Okay.
And so then say the company makes money and they pay like a dividend, they pay money out to their shareholders. You know, they pay out $100 million and you get, you won 1% of the stock, you get 1% of that $100 million. So it's basically like you get a piece of that company and that company's revenue. Where it applies to startups usually is if you own parts of the company and then you do that IPO, the initial public offering, so like Facebook has done, where you go and sell the shares of the company to investors. Everybody that owns shares of that company leading up to that IPO is going to get paid out at that point. So if you go to an IPO and you have half of the company and that company gets sold, you're selling all your shares to other people. You're getting paid. And that's when people get these huge windfalls, hundreds of millions of dollars. Because they own a part of the company and then they sold it on the public market.
Yeah, I think of it as like a certificate of title of ownership for whatever percentage,
So as the company gets more valuable, those shares of ownership become more valuable. When the company starts, it's not worth anything.
Yeah.
So you got 100% of nothing, but
And vice versa.
if you own 1% of Google, that's pretty significant because Google's $20 billion in value.
And how does that equity build? Like what? I know you said it's based on revenue, but I don't really understand that part.
What makes it go up in value?
Yeah.
This
is getting in a good dynamic business concept, right?
Yeah, no, this is good. Probably the best. There's a lot of ways to value companies. Sometimes it's based on future growth potential. So like a new company that's growing a lot, maybe assigned a higher value and it'll trade at a higher value on a stock exchange. But kind of the basic way to think about it is price relative to earnings. So you'll see things like price to earnings ratio. And so say a company makes $100, right? And their price to earnings ratio is 10, the company would be $1,000, basically. Maybe I should draw this up. But so you basically got some relation between how much the company earns and how much it's worth. And so say it's that multiple of 10, the company's worth $1,000 and makes $100. That's a 10% return per year. Does that make sense? So then if you value the company at $2,000, that $100 is a 5% return. So those can be all, it's basically traded on the market. As people buy more of the shares, it drives the price up. As people sell shares, it goes down. And so some value is going to be placed on the company. Generally, it should relate to earnings pretty well. Companies that trade at higher PEs, meaning so higher value relative to their earnings, it's because people think they're going to grow a lot in the future. The inverse would be people that think the company's not going to grow very much, it's going to be a lower valuation relative to earnings. But so it's usually based on how much money they're making and expectations of future growth. The interesting thing about that is, say your price to earnings ratio is 10. If you earn an extra $1 in that company, it creates an extra $10 in value for the company. So the way you make money in stocks is if earnings in that company grow, the price to earnings ratio stays the same, the value in the company goes up.
I guess my other little question, I think I need to take some kind of, I don't forecast my company to be in the billions or the millions of dollars, but hopefully. So I'm looking at more the $100 example that you used. I guess my main question is then how do stocks or dividends or shares, I guess that's all kind of one and the same, right? The three, stocks, dividends. how does that translate to real money? Like, how is that? I guess that's my big.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
looking at my small business model. How does this all translate? I guess.
Yeah. So as you've got your business. As you make money, then you get percentage of the income based on your ownership. So as the business earns money, you get a share of that. The two other ways to monetize that is if you sell the company through an acquisition, or you go public through an IPO. And so that's basically the only time that you would be able to make money off of that equity.
You get money by
giving away your company. You sell the ownership.
Okay. And where does that money come from?
Somebody else that wants to buy it. So say like Google acquires a company, they'll pay $100 million to buy this company. All the founders in that company, they sell their shares. They don't own the company anymore, but then they have the cash.
Okay.
Or a plumber, like a plumbing company.
Got it.
Like another plumber buys them out.
Now it makes sense.
Yeah.
But they still control the company, right?
Not if you sell your shares. Yeah, if you sell your shares, you cash out.
Unless they want to hire you on as a manager or something like that, right? They just want ownership, but they want
the other way that you make money.
Interesting.
The other way to make money is to either produce something, sell the something, keep the company, sell the something, and you get the money from that, or sell stocks in the company, but then you still have to either produce or provide a service of some kind.
Right. To
And
produce that real world
gives
money.
that gives you the income from the company until you can get to a place where Google says, hey, that's worth something to us. We'd like to offer you $100 gajillion. Would you like some money?
Yeah. So it's money given to arbitrary dividends, essentially, based on
dividends is different.
Yeah,
perception.
dividends.
Okay. Shares.
Stock and share, yeah.
So it's sort of an arbitrary percent initially. It's like I own 15%. And then later on, as things change in the stock market and all sorts of things, then it actually can translate into Google saying, I will buy your company for $200 per share. And I'll buy all 5,000 shares.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's making a bit more sense.
Yeah.
So also where we're sitting here, how we were talking about stock options versus equity, is that in a startup company, what you're paying in is sweat equity, right? So I'm not giving actual money,
right. That was my
but
primary
doing work
question.
to earn this equity. So it always costs something, whether it costs sweat or money.
Yeah.
So that's what it really comes down to. So but that's the difference whenever you're a startup to whenever you're a big company, that you can still have that equity. And then whenever it becomes stock options, then that's where that difference is.
Yeah, I guess it's
but they're pretty much the same thing.
A complex concept, because a lot of it seems to be sort of like arbitrary or theoretical or...
It is, because you're making that guess. I mean, if the company fails, it's worth nothing.
Yeah.
And it's
so everybody's...
Too.
Yeah.
Whenever it's up to that stage, it's all in the market.
So and that's why it can be a powerful motivator, because if a bunch of people have equity in the company, they're incentivized to make the company work. Because if they don't, then all that equity that they work so hard to get, it's not worth anything. So, but there's that part before if you don't get acquired or IPO, then there's no market for your shares. So you can't liquidate those.
I think profit sharing is a pretty good idea in the business.
Yeah, sometimes that's split based on ownership, or sometimes you just do profit share separate.
Like to all employees.
Yeah.
I mean, you can watch like Khan Academy.
YouTube.
Yeah, Khan Academy. They have a very good economics section, and it's still great.
Yeah.
All right, investor dilemmas. So looking at friends and family versus angel investors and venture capitalists. So friends and family, it's going to be easiest to raise money from them, but they're not professional investors, and they may not be happy if you waste their money. If they really don't know any better, because they're not professional investors, and they may not have the networks to really help you out or add value to the company. So, but in any case, sometimes this is where you start. Angel investors are people that invest on their own behalf. They may be able to add value because they may have experience or something like that. Venture capitalists are the most sophisticated, they're the hardest to get. They raise money from other people and then they invest on behalf of those other investors. And so they're professional investors, basically. So they can bring a lot to the table in terms of social capital and experience. Your risks, you know, is it friends and family? Is it may seem unprofessional? You got lax standards. The idea may not be vetted. You also got playing with fire. Then angel investors. You don't have the oversight from VCs. It could be difficult.